In Module 2, Lesson 4, we continue interpreting and computing division of a fraction by a fraction with models. And we're going to begin with an exercise in writing equivalent fractions. So for each of the examples, we're going to write at least 3 equivalent fractions. Remember that to write an equivalent fraction, you can multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the same number, or you can divide both the numerator and the denominator by the same number. And you can choose any number as long as you multiply both the numerator and the denominator by that same number. So following that pattern, if we multiplied both the numerator and denominator in 2/3 by 2, we would get 4/6. If we multiplied both the numerator and denominator by 3, we would get 6/9. If we multiplied both the numerator and denominator by 4, we would get 8/12. And one more example, if we multiplied both the numerator and denominator by 5, we would get 10/15. We could continue making equivalent fractions forever. There's an infinite number of equivalent fractions. Looking at the next example, 10/12, we know that 10 and 12 are both divisible by 2, so we will divide by 2 first. And when we divide both 10 and 12 by 2, we would get 5/6. And that is simplest form, so we won't be able to divide to find equivalent fractions anymore, but we can certainly multiply to get equivalent fractions. So if we take 10 and 12 and we multiply them by 2, we could get 20/24. Interestingly enough, when we find an equivalent fraction, we can make more equivalent fractions from the equivalent fraction. So we could take 5/6 and multiply both the numerator and denominator by 3, and that would give us 15/18. One more example. We could take 15/18 and multiply both the numerator and denominator by 2, which would give us 30/36. So remember, an equivalent fraction can be built by multiplying both the numerator and denominator by the same number, or dividing both the numerator and denominator by the same number. As we move along in our study of dividing fractions, we are starting to work with more word problems because we need to be able to set the problem up, not just solve it. So in example 1, Molly purchased 11/8 cups of strawberries, and she eats 2/8 in a serving. We want to know how many servings did Molly purchase. So we're asked again to use a model to prove our answer, and we'll need to start off by representing 11/8. To model 11/8, I've chosen to use a number line, and each piece on the number line represents 1/8. So as we look at it, it's 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and so on. And I actually have modeled 12/8 on this number line. Remember that the problem is telling us that Molly eats 2/8 of cups in a serving. So for every 2 pieces, that would be 1 serving. There's 1 serving, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, there's 5, and this would be 6. But remember, when we count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, this is where we ended right here. And we do not have the other part of this serving. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full servings, and then 1 piece of the, or 1/8 of the 2/8 that we would need for the second serving. So 1 out of 2 pieces that make up a full serving would mean that we have a half of a serving. Look at it at that fractional piece at the end again, just to make sure that you understand visually what's going on. Each serving is 2/8 of a cup. So when we go on the number line 2 spaces, that's a full serving. 1 serving, 2 servings, 3 servings, 4 servings, 5 servings, and then we have 1/8 of a cup left, which does not make up a full serving, but it does make half of a serving. And so in our final answer, we have 5 1/2 servings. Then in example 2, we're told, now imagine that Molly's friend Xavier purchased 11/8 cups of strawberries and that he eats 3/4 cup servings. How many servings has he purchased? And we'll need to use the model to prove our answer on this as well. The first thing we need to do is go back to our representation, and I'll draw the number line so this time around, in our 11/8 cups, we're going to have to find out how many eighths 3/4 cup is before we can find out the number of servings. 3/4 when we make 3/4 into an equivalent fraction with 8 in the denominator, that would be multiplying 4 times 2 to get the denominator of 8, which means we would have to multiply the numerator by 2 as well. So 3 times 2 is 6, and 4 times 2 is 8. So our equivalent fraction for 3/4 is 6/8. Now we know that when we go down to our diagram, we will need 6/8 for every 1 serving. So we can then show that this would be 1 full serving, 6/8. And if we continue on for another 6/8, that would get us to 12/8. But remember, this section from 11 to 12/8 we don't have, because Xavier only purchased 11/8 cups. So his strawberries ended right here. Now the portion or the fraction of that second serving that we have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 6 pieces, because we're looking for 6/8 in our full serving and we only have 5/8. So 5 of the 6 pieces are left. So our final answer then would be 1 and 5/6. When we look at example 3, we're asked to find the quotient of 3/4 divided by 2/3. It's asking us 2/3 of what is 3/4, or how many 2/3 are in 3/4. You need to ask several questions. First of all, is your answer larger or smaller than 1? And we can determine that by seeing if the number we're dividing by is smaller than the number we're dividing. 2/3 is smaller than 3/4, so we'll have an answer that is larger than 1, because there is at least one piece of 2/3 in a 3/4 in 3/4 of something. The question is more difficult to model than the other questions in lesson 3 because these fractions don't have common denominators. So what we really need to do, again, is to rewrite the fractions with common denominators, at least for this exercise. So we can think of this as, say our common denominator would be 12. 4 and 3 both go into 12. So if we convert both of those fractions into twelfths, we would get 9/12 and 8/12. So we're dividing 9/12 by 8/12. And this is a little easier to see that our answer will be greater than 1 because there is at least one section of 8/12 in a 9/12 piece. What we have, though, if we were to model it, I'm going to leave that to each of you, but if we are to model it, we would find that there is one whole piece of 8/12 and then one extra piece out of the 9, one extra piece out of the 8 pieces that we would need for yet another serving. So our final answer then would be 1 1/8. As I did in lesson 3, I'm going to leave the exercises for you to work on independently and refer back to the videos if you are not sure how to model your problems, and certainly check with another friend or with the teacher in class to make sure that you're on the right track.